Hey everybody, I'm back with my review of Maul Shadow Lord episodes 5 and 6. We're starting to kind of head towards the finale now. The Empire has arrived, and the Inquisitors have revealed themselves, or at least Marok has. Um, Again, the show is enjoyable, and I like what they're presenting, and I like the story that they're telling overall. The problem with telling stories during this time is we know what came before, and for the most part, we know what's coming after. And in that case, it just feels superfluous. Um, you know, if we're holding to Maul dies on Tatooine, then all of this is a moot point anyway. It's filling in a gap that, while enjoyable to watch, isn't really necessary in the grand scheme of things. This is a lot of what kind of tanked Solo. It's not that Solo is a bad movie. It's enjoyable. I like it quite a bit. It's got a lot of good stuff in it, but ultimately it's meaningless in the grand scheme of things. It's not a story anybody really cared to hear. Um, And this kind of feels the same way because, while Maul is still on his quest to try and, win Devin over to being an apprentice, it, they aren't really showing anywhere where she seems really receptive to this. Now, there's a couple things that could happen here that could change that. And that's, one of the side stories that has now interwoven into this, which is, the cop and his kid, the captain, and now involving the mother who works for the Empire. And the only thing that I can think of at this point that would be a potential catalyst for Devin to turn to the dark side would be that in service of protecting the captain and his son, that her master ends up getting killed by one of the Inquisitors um, in the attempt to save these two. And I could see her then, one, becoming enraged that her master has been killed, but also having resentment because instead of in this time where the Empire and the Inquisitors have arrived, instead of laying low and trying to just kind of focus on getting out of the city, they are now caught up in not only trying to avoid being hunted themselves, but also trying to protect these two. And so I could see where in maybe that kind of situation she might turn, but they aren't really, unless there's something really drastic that changes in the next two episodes. I really don't see a sufficient enough build there. So, but and of course at the end of episode 6, there's a tease that Marok is talking to Vader, or at a minimum the Grand Inquisitor. But since we've seen Vader in the teaser posters, they released, which could be a swerve, but at the same time, because I also don't see where Voss comes in at this point. I mean, if these are the last two episodes, then coming up here, then they got a lot of cramming in, which has been a complaint of mine through a lot of some of these Star Wars series. I felt like Acolyte really fell victim to that, where it had so much it had to wrap up in those last two episodes that it feels like it just rushes through it instead of giving it proper time to marinate and really build toward that finale. there's also a little hint that maybe Two Boots will do something. As there's this kind of throwaway scene where the imperial commander orders him to take his boots off because they're not standard imperial regulation, and so and he kind of gives that kind of look. So there could be something there, but again, that just adds more and more and more. I mean, ultimately, unless the captain and his kid serves as some kind of catalyst for Devon's turn, I just don't see why that storyline was even in this. You could have ended pretty much right now in the same place without involving those two. That story could be completely cut out. It doesn't change the core story of Maul trying to consolidate all of the syndicates under his control, while also having the sub story of trying to get this, Jedi youngling and win her over to his side of things and become his apprentice. Like, that's really all you needed. The storyline with the captain and his kid and his wife, and right now it just seems like it's just filler. You could have cut that out, as far as I can tell. Now, maybe there's a big payoff in episodes 5 and 6, or 7 and 8, but obviously we'll have to wait till next week to find out. Again, these are gorgeous animated shows. I mean, the animation is gorgeous. And again, this is ultimately very, it's very entertaining, and I enjoy it. But as a Star Wars nerd, who has been ingesting Star Wars content for my entire life, and how everything, even standalone stories that you can enjoy on its own still have some kind of interconnectivity. But if you were really diving into something where you look at like Shadows of the Empire, which told the story of what happened in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, it's a standalone story. You can read it and enjoy it as its own thing, but it is, because of it being told in this very specific in-between time frame, it has to build on that. It can't just be, this just kind of random thing, especially when you're involving certain characters. And, telling Maul's story between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, but more specifically Rebels and his demise, I mean, you have to really be building on that. And to jump into this time frame that, like I said, does not really pay into anything, because again, if we're not setting up, because even if you want to say that Maul dies at Rebels, if we're not setting up Devon becoming Darth Talon and then working that into an episode 10, 11, 12, or making a series that takes place before the sequel trilogy, but after Return of the Jedi, after Mandalorian, where we're telling the story of, the Crimson Dawn and telling those George Lucas sequel trilogy stories after the fact. I mean, if we're not doing that in some form, then ultimately the show is meaningless. And this, specifically because of this storyline of Maul trying to be the crime lord, because that's what George had originally visioned for 7, 8, 9. And if we're not going there, again, as enjoyable as this show is, it's pointless. You know, like I said, I really, I'm enjoying the show. I like Maul. He's one of my favorite characters. And, I'm happy to see more Maul. I mean, it's the same way that, I am with Boba Fett. I really love Boba Fett. I like what they've done in a lot of ways with his characters. You know, I wish we could get a season 2 of Book of Boba Fett where he's like, okay, I tried playing nice and this is what happened. So, yeah, I'm going to be a little more harsh, a little more cutthroat. I want to, let me see that. But we'll see what happens in the next 2 episodes. Again, I enjoy it. It's entertaining and it's a good show, but it's the curse of knowledge, because I know what George wanted. I'm watching this with this kind of grain of, kind of sticking in my, this grit sticking in my craw a bit, because I'm like, you're not giving me that though. You're not giving me what the payoff to this story should be, which is George's 789. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you enjoying it? Are you having the same frustration that I am watching this with that knowledge of what George's 789 should be and be going, look, if we're not going there, what are we doing? Anyway, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.